Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Lucia Valentine, and I'm the West Virginia field organizer for Moms Clean Air Force. We're really excited today to talk to you a little bit about chemical recycling, the dangers it poses to communities across West Virginia, and how we can take action against the build out of these types of facilities across the state. So Moms Clean Air Force is a community of moms and dads across the nation that works to fight against air pollution and climate change, centering children's health. So I'm really excited to be with you all today. With me as well is Rachel Meyer, the Ohio River Valley Coordinator for Moms Clean Air Force, Andrew Earley with Fair Shake Environmental Legal Services, and Sandy Field with Save Our Susquehanna. So I'm really excited for you to get to hear from all of these presenters and learn more about chemical recycling and how we can work together to protect the health of children and communities across West Virginia. So with that, I will start sharing my screen to give an overview of chemical recycling and the facilities that we are focused on right now in West Virginia. Awesome. So what is chemical recycling? I know there are a lot of terms floating around out there and a lot of greenwashing happening around this process. So we're here to kind of give you an overview and really let you know what's going on. So chemical recycling or advanced recycling generally refers to the technologies that break down plastic into its original chemical building blocks. So most facilities are using what's called pyrolysis and gasification processes to incinerate or burn plastic trash at high heat, which creates toxic pollution in our air. So this is not recycling and it is not clean energy. And these facilities are greenwashing because they are proposing chemical recycling as a solution to our plastic problem. But we believe that producing less plastic is more of a solution than burning plastic. So we're going to get into this a little bit more later in the webinar, but this is an overview of the process of chemical recycling. Chemical recycling has profound health impacts on children and families. So not only does incinerating plastic create climate warming gases and release toxic air pollution that impacts our health, but exposure to this type of pollution also increases the risk of cancer, developmental issues, hormonal irregularities, and neurological problems. And so many of these chemical recycling facilities are also being proposed in communities of color and low-income communities that are already overburdened with air pollution and environmental pollution, posing a large environmental justice risk for the communities that they are located in. So part of our job is to really advocate against the build-out of these facilities, especially in overburdened communities across West Virginia. So the first facility that has been proposed that we're going to focus on today is the Clean Seas facility in Quincy, West Virginia. So Clean Seas is the subsidiary of Clean Vision Corporation, which is the overarching company. And Clean Seas has been working with the West Virginia Department of Economic Development to partner to bring this chemical recycling facility to Quincy, West Virginia. So the plastic trash that would enter this facility would be burned and create harmful air pollution, contaminated oil, and toxic ash, which would harm the community of Quincy. This facility also plans to incinerate plastic starting at a rate of 110 tons per day, with plans to scale up to 500 tons per day over time. So they are clearly just getting started and plan to expand from 100 to 500 tons a day, which is a lot of pollution. Clean Seas is located in Quincy, West Virginia, which is an unincorporated town about 10 miles east of our state capital in Charleston, West Virginia. And Quincy is located in Kanawha County, which historically has some of the most toxic air pollution in the country because of legacy petrochemical buildout. So this is, again, an environmental justice issue for this community. And the residents of Quincy would be greatly impacted by this type of pollution should this facility be fully built out. And an overarching development timeline for Clean Seas. About a year ago, in June 2023, the project was first announced by Governor Justice. And then in February of this year, Clean Seas received approval from the West Virginia Economic Development Authority, which now accelerates their process of development. And then Clean Seas plans to open later this year with no exact date announced yet, but we know that they have, of course, plans to scale up over time, initially from that 100 tons per day to 500 tons per day. So we expect there to be a lot more in the permitting process before this plant is fully up and running. And we will take questions at the end, but if you have any Clean Seas specific questions, feel free to write them down or put them in the chat. And I'm going to pivot to the second facility that we're focused on, which is Empire Diversified Energy, or Empire. And this proposed facility is in Follansbee, West Virginia. So Empire Diversified Energy is a proposed chemical recycling plant in Follansbee, and the original proposal was for a pyrolysis medical waste facility, but the community advocated strongly against this medical waste facility, and so the company Empire now has pivoted to plastics. So it's now a chemical recycling facility instead of a medical waste facility. And they hope to process at least 70 tons of plastic per day, which would result in unknown amounts of air pollution. So Empire is located in the northern panhandle of our state in Brooke County along the Ohio River. And again, this facility would greatly impact the residents of Follansbee. There is a history of industrial build out in Follansbee, and actually since the closure of the Mountain State Carbon Coke plant a few years ago, Follansbee's air quality has actually improved. So the community is hopeful and do not want to go backwards, and so they're very fiercely advocating against this facility again because it poses large environmental justice impacts and air pollution impacts should it be built out. So just for reference, again, Clean Seas is planning to start with 100 pounds or 100 tons of plastic per day, scaling up to 500 tons, and Empire starting at around 70 tons per day. So that is a lot of plastic that would be burned across the state if both of these facilities become up and running. And then the development timeline for Empire, in 2022, the original pyrolysis medical waste facility was proposed. The community voiced opposition, and Empire pivoted to plastics. And then in December of 2023, the building permit was approved to begin construction of the chemical recycling plant. And then in July of this year, so next month, the plant is expected to begin operation, although their air permit has not yet been approved by the West Virginia DEP. So we do expect, a delay there, which gives us more time to advocate against the build out of this facility. So that is my overview of chemical recycling and the two facilities we're focused on in this presentation. Again, we'll take questions at the end, but I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Rachel Meyer, our Ohio River Valley coordinator for Moms Clean Air Force, to go a little deeper into the processes of chemical recycling.
Thanks, excuse me. Thanks, Lucia. Okay. We can go on to the next slide. For this overview, I thought we'd start with some terms you may hear because there are a lot of them flying around out there. So on the left in the red are the greenwashing terms, such as advanced recycling, chemical recycling. You may hear molecular recycling. And also Clean Seas specifically likes to say plastic conversion. And then on the right in green is what the process really is, plastic incineration. False recycling, it's not truly recycling. And then there's the technical name pyrolysis and gasification, which is recognized by the EPA. And at the local level, you may also hear solid waste combustion. So what's the matter with advanced or chemical recycling? Well, there's a lot, of course. It's not advanced and it's not recycling. The terms chemical recycling and advanced recycling generally refer to a process that burns plastic trash in incinerators and turns it into harmful air pollution and chemical wastes. It's taking the plastic pollution problem and putting it into the air. Some companies are attempting to separate out the toxic chemicals to then be shipped, endangering anyone near the route and potentially contaminating the surrounding environment. But the vast majority of what industry refers to as chemical or advanced recycling are actually plastic to fuel operations, where plastic trash is partially burned and what comes out the end is heavily contaminated fuels. This is not even allowed to be called chemical recycling in Europe. Um, Chemical recycling fuel products are low quality and are typically burned on site to operate the facility itself, which is Empire's plan. Alternatively, the fuels may be blended with cleaner commercial fuels and burned elsewhere. Clean Seas says they will be producing clean fuel, but the way to get cleaner fuel from this process is to keep burning off the contaminants, releasing more and more toxins into the air. So we know that burning plastic creates significant climate warming greenhouse gas pollution while simultaneously releasing a host of toxic pollution known to negatively impact health. This toxic pollution can include hazardous air pollutants, or HAPs, heavy metals, and particulate matter, PM. And beyond all that, keep in mind that plastics contain thousands of chemicals, over 13,000, some of which are known to cause cancer and to be endocrine disruptors. And in addition to what they are putting in the air, these facilities are generating hazardous solid and sometimes liquid waste as well. So burning plastic moves the waste from the landfill to pollution in the air and directly into lungs. And there again, you see some of the potential health impacts from living near a chemical recycling facility. And I want to point out that in some ways, children are going to be more negatively impacted by chemical recycling pollution. Children are especially vulnerable to air pollution. They breathe faster than adults, so they inhale more air and can be exposed to more air pollution for their body size. Children exercise more and spend more time outside than adults, which means that they can breathe more outdoor air pollution. So children's lungs and brains are still developing, and developing lungs and brains are more sensitive to pollution than fully formed adult lungs. And again, more plastic waste incinerators are located in environmental justice communities, low-income communities, and communities of color that are already overburdened by pollution. So we'll talk about some of the fuel that I mentioned that is being produced. So in addition to the air pollution and the toxic waste, the chemical recycling incinerators produce large amounts of heavily contaminated pyrolysis oils, which can be made into highly toxic fuels. So in 2023, an investigation showed just how dangerous these fuels really are. A Chevron refinery in Pascagoula, Mississippi, received EPA approval to use the pyrolysis oils derived from incinerating plastics as ingredients to make jet and boat fuel. Air pollution produced from burning the jet fuel is expected to cause cancer in 1 in every 4 people exposed over a lifetime. And the boat fuel ingredient is even more toxic. Every person exposed over a lifetime would be expected to get cancer. This risk level is 1 million times higher than what the EPA usually considers acceptable for new chemicals, and 6 times higher than the chances of lung cancer from a lifetime of smoking. We can go on to the next slide, thanks. So how can these companies get away with putting out all of this pollution? Next slide, please. So let's first look at some of the groups that have played a role in all this. You see them there on the slide. And all of these groups have interests in chemical recycling. They are supporting more build out of the petrochemical industry. Plastics are a lifeline for that industry and the entire oil and gas industry as we transition to healthier energy sources. So they want a way to justify increased production. In fact, the plastics industry would like to triple production by 2050. So they want chemical recycling to appear to be the way to make this a circular industry, eliminating the waste that we all know is a huge problem with plastics. And they have powerful lobbyists, especially the ACC, the American Chemistry Council. In Oh, next slide, please. In some states, some of these groups have been successful in getting plastic incineration reclassified as a form of recycling or manufacturing. So this allows chemical companies to evade pollution controls under the EPA Clean Air Act and also take advantage of tax breaks and subsidies set up for recycling facilities. The chemical industry wants to convince the Environmental Protection Agency at the federal level and states to reclassify plastic incineration as advanced recycling and manufacturing to avoid pollution controls that help protect public health and the climate. Having plastic incineration reclassified and not regulated under the Clean Air Act would allow these facilities to emit harmful air pollution without any monitoring, reporting, or pollution control technologies. And so far, 25 states have passed these laws promoting advanced recycling. So in West Virginia specifically, House Bill 4084 reclassifies this type of solid waste incineration as manufacturing. And it reads, part of it reads, an advanced recycling facility is a manufacturing facility subject to applicable department manufacturing regulations for air, water, and land use. Advanced recycling facilities shall not be considered solid waste facilities. So this reclassification exempts them from some of the protections of the Clean Air Act. And I just wanted to share this resource that covers a lot of what I've just mentioned in this presentation. And you can find it on Moms Clean Air Force website. So it's a great resource to have for this information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And I will share a link to our fact sheet as well in case anyone would like to have that. Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. Our next presenter is Andrew Earley, the West Virginia staff attorney for Fair Shake Environmental Legal Services. And so Andrew is going to speak to the legal side of advocacy work and how the local land use and permitting processes play a role in our site fights. So Andrew, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lucia. And as Lucia mentioned, I'm Andrew Earley. I'm a West Virginia staff attorney with Fair Shake Environmental Legal Services. Fair Shake is a nonprofit law firm dedicated to environmental work, and we work with community groups and local residents to help them pursue the communities that they want to live in. We operate in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. And that's, I think, really all I'll say about that, and kind of want to get into a little bit of the meat around permitting and land use laws. Danielle, you can go to the next slide whenever. I think one thing that I have to be sure and say as an attorney is the disclaimer that whatever I say today will not be legal advice. I'm only kind of giving legal information about all of this, all of the things we're talking about, and you should take it as such. If you do have questions and want to reach out to me, please feel free to do so. My contact information will be at the end of the slide, and you can do that whenever. But today's just kind of going to be a broad overview around some of the legal tools that exist around this line of work. I think the first thing I'll talk about is probably permitting. My slides are not going to be that helpful and guiding you all, but that's kind of how I tend to operate. And then we'll talk a little bit about zoning and land use. Permitting, I think Lucia commented on this some, and so did Rachel. Typically, when industry begins operating or starts to build a facility, they have to get certain permits from their local environmental protection agency. In West Virginia, those are Department of Environmental Protection. Federally, that's the EPA. Other states call it different things every now and then. And those permits are essentially permits to pollute. It is what allows the facility to do what they do. And on the air side, it is what they are allowed to emit from their various stacks. So when they burn something, the byproduct of that goes into the air. And the permit says how much is allowed to be emitted and what is allowed to be emitted, and gives them legal permission to do that. The permits are important for both industry and the public because that is how you know what a facility is doing or will do. And that is how you can figure out, what you as a community member or a resident need to be concerned about in your own backyard. And in the backyards of your friends and family. The permitting process is often kind of long and arduous. I think Lucia mentioned that one of the facilities is still going through the permitting process, even though they started their first go around in 2022. And so it takes a long time. And all along that way, I think one thing that I want anyone listening to know is that that is time that you can be asking questions and talking to the folks in your community, your local representatives, your state agencies who are there to serve you, who are paid for by your taxpayer dollars, to answer questions about these types of things so that you do have a better understanding of what's going on. And the other important part of the permitting process is that all of the permits have to comply with state and federal law. Often the way that that works, particularly on the air side, is via the Clean Air Act, which is a large federal statute. And the states, and in West Virginia's case, are kind of delegated authority to implement it on their own, but they have to do it in line with the provisions of the Clean Air Act. And so all of the permits that are issued have to be in line with that. And if they're not, that is when community members and the public, and ideally our government agents, are able to say, no, you can't do it this way. This is what the law requires. This is how you have, if you're going to create this pollution, this is how you have to do it. And so the permitting side is a really important piece of it. The other thing that I wanted to kind of talk with you all about today is, kind of land use and zoning. And particularly, I wanted to talk about that in West Virginia, because that's where I live and practice. And so it's really all I know about. Land use is another powerful tool that communities have to determine what happens in their community. Oftentimes I'll refer to it back and forth as zoning or land use. But the kind of, I think, broad picture of it is that in West Virginia, the way that it happens is we have a statute. It's Chapter 8A of the West Virginia Code, which talks about land use planning. And that statute specifically delegates authority to communities to create various, local agencies, often called planning commissions, that can dictate what can be built and where it can be built. So you'll see, a lot of different things. Oftentimes this comes in residential zoning, where in one part of town you might only be able to build houses. Sometimes that's even only single family houses. Other zoning might allow you to build like multi-use housing, which would be like apartment buildings and things like that. There are things like mixed use zoning where you have businesses and housing. And then there's industrial zoning as well. And that is what would allow, a kind of a business that is more likely to be a heavy polluter to do their business and operations. And at every step of that process, so in West Virginia, if a municipality or a county goes through the process of establishing a planning commission and they create a comprehensive plan, And they enact a local zoning ordinance that dictates what can be built and where it can be built. At every step of that process, the public can be involved, and often has to be. You have a chance to talk to your local officials about what you want to see in the kind of comprehensive plan or in the zoning ordinance. And I'll talk about kind of the difference between those two things in a second. And that allows you to shape your community. In West Virginia, it's not incredibly common to see these things established. A lot of our cities have established them. And so like, you know, the city of Charleston, which is our capital, has a comprehensive plan and has a local planning board, and that dictates what can be built in Charleston proper. But it doesn't apply down the road to Quincy, because Quincy is a different municipality. And Quincy, I believe, well, yeah, I'll get into that. So the way that would play out for a place like Quincy, because they are also in Kanawha County, which is where Charleston is that the county can establish the same exact thing, and that would control for Quincy. But if Quincy is an incorporated community, they could do the same thing as Charleston. They, under West Virginia code, any incorporated municipality has the ability to establish these things so that they have a say in what goes into their backyards. And the way that often plays out is through two documents. One is the comprehensive plan, which is not a legally binding document, but it's kind of like the playbook. It's the vision board of the planning world. And that is where you kind of, you know, if you look through a comprehensive plan, they're very long, arduous documents that have a lot of information in them. They have pictures and graphics and data, and then a lot of vision for what a community might want to transform itself into. And so even though it's not a legally binding document, it is a document that community members can and should be involved in the formation of. And the other kind of really important piece of all of that is the local zoning ordinance, which is the legally binding document because it is a locally enacted law. And that is what the appropriate board or commission would be evaluating when something is proposed. So for example, this is outside of kind of the industry world a little bit, but I think it's a useful example because we're probably all familiar with it. If a developer came into town and wanted to build a large multifamily housing unit, such as an apartment complex, they would, in a city or a municipality that has enacted zoning laws, have to get permission to do so. And if what they were proposing was not in line with the local zoning ordinances, the zoning board or the commission, whatever it may be, would have the authority to say, no, you can't do that here. And so that's the right there is really the power of zoning, is to say, this is what is legally allowed in our community, and that's not it. And because that's not it, you can't build it here. And if communities are active in shaping that process, that is a very powerful tool that they can utilize to help determine what is and is not allowed in their community. I think one thing that I would really need to mention is that there are a lot of exceptions in the zoning world, things called variances or conditional use permits or special use permits, depending on where you are and what they call them, which would give the board the authority to say, well, yeah, usually we don't allow this, but in this circumstance, for XYZ reasons, we're going to be okay with it. And so, it's not like anything in the legal world, it's not the end all be all. But it is something that I would want all of the community members to be aware of. And if you want to read more about, how that plays out in West Virginia, Chapter 8A of the West Virginia Code is where you can do that. I think that's kind of probably all I really have to say on that subject. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. But otherwise, I'd be glad to pass it on to Sandy, because she's going to talk about some really cool work that her community's done. And I'm excited to hear from her.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew. And thanks for highlighting that section of state code, because I feel like those are all processes that are really hard for people to understand, especially when they're trying to organize in their community. So we really appreciate you being on the ground and willing to help out on these site bites. It's really important work. And yes, as Andrew mentioned, next is Sandy Field with Save Our Susquehanna. And Sandy, along with a group of citizens and advocates, helped to stop a chemical recycling facility from being built in Point Township, Pennsylvania. So if developed, this facility would have been the largest petrochemical plant in the nation. And so we're really excited to learn from Sandy about what made their campaign successful and any takeaways that she has to share with folks who are working on other site bites. So Sandy, we'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you very much. So I think from the other speakers, you're going to realize that, as an environmental advocate in your community, you're going to learn a bunch of stuff that you didn't expect to learn about chemistry and the oil and gas industry and zoning laws. And believe it or not, it's also a lot of fun. So let me just tell you about what we did in Point Township in central Pennsylvania. Could you go to the next slide, please? So I'll just tell you the basics of the Encina plant, and I think that you'll recognize a lot of the terms and things that have that Rachel talked about already. The plant was called an advanced recycling plant, which sounds like a good idea, but really isn't. They were going to put it along Route 11 along the Susquehanna River. They were going to process 450,000 tons of plastic per year. It was going to be brought on 100 trucks per day in a small rural area that already has enough traffic issues on that small highway. They were going to melt it by catalytic pyrolysis and then make benzene, toluene, xylene, and propylene chemicals from it and from the plastic, and ship it by rail along the Susquehanna River. They said it was going to be a $1.1 billion plant, and they were going to create 300 jobs. Next slide, please. So our concerns were many. So once we started learning about the plant, we became concerned about flooding. The site that they proposed was in the 100-year floodplain of the Susquehanna River. You can see in the figure that there's a little overlay of the plant proposal on the river there. The purple and the light purple are the 100 and 500-year floodplain. And if you've been paying attention, you know that that's more like the 25-year floodplain now. You can see how it impinges on their site plan right there along the river. You can also see that there's dark lines right next to the river. That's the rail line. So those would also be right next to the river, transporting, toxic carcinogenic chemicals like benzene. We're concerned about the air pollution that Rachel talked about. They said that they were going to power the thing by natural gas at one point, but whatever they burned to create the high heat, was going to create emissions. We were concerned about water pollution from the washing and sorting phase of the project. They were going to take 2.9 million gallons of water from the river, wash and sort the plastic, and then melt it. and that would generate microplastic and forever chemicals that are used in the production of different kinds of plastic. I mentioned the traffic already, 100 trucks per day, that's 1 every 5 minutes. Light and noise pollution from 24/7 operation of the plant. The storage of the chemicals at the site we were concerned about, and also the transport of those chemicals along the river by rail. The next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the what the company said, and I think that this is important because in looking at other projects of this type in North Carolina and Ohio and other places, they seem to kind of rely on the same messaging, right? Advanced recycling, chemical recycling, these are good things. We are environmentalists, they like to say. So these are some of the things that they said to us. 300 local jobs. They said that was going to be $2 billion in local economic development, but they never were able to tell us where they got those numbers. They said it was a circular recycling process. So it's creating the circular economy, going from waste plastic to chemicals that could be used to make new plastic, with the idea that this was going to be somehow reducing virgin plastic production. Although, you know, we've come to learn that that actually really doesn't happen. They said all the emissions will stay in the building. They said we'll follow all regulations. What they didn't say was that right now in Pennsylvania and according to the EPA, those forever chemicals, the PFAS and the microplastic are not actually regulated in wastewater. So they might be following the regulations, but they could still put microplastic and PFAS in our river. They said we're environmentalists. This is going to solve the plastics crisis. You know, we're on your team, kind of thing. They said that they chose our region because we have a lot of universities and we have the educated workforce that they were going to need for their advanced recycling process. But we also heard from various people around town when they were observed eating dinner, talking about the rural bumpkins in our area and how we talked and things like that. So we don't think that this was actually genuine either. They said that they were experienced in this and that they had a pilot plant in Texas that had done this. But when we asked for the address and we tried to find the air permit for this pilot plant, we couldn't find that because there's not really a plant there. It's kind of a lab that does different parts of the process, but has never really done them all together, even though they're going to be scaling up to 450,000 tons of plastic every year. So that was a little concerning. They said that the water would be cleaner when they put it back in the river than when they got it out, implied that our river was already dirty and contaminated and we wouldn't even be able to tell the difference because it was such a nasty river. But we knew already that our river had been actually improved in recent years. It sounds like that's also the case for one of these other plants in West Virginia, where they know the air is actually improved. So those are important things to keep track of. And they said they would have their own emergency response team, but we had questions about what those guys would be protecting, you know, their stuff or our stuff. And so anyway, these are the kind of promises that we heard. And now I kind of want to tell you what our approach was. And I'll just tell you out from the outset, I called this approach push all the buttons. We didn't know what was going to work. And so we did everything we could think of with our coalition partners, environmental groups, and legal aid groups to try and figure out ways to stop them. So first we did our homework, and I kind of alluded to this. You have to learn everything about advanced recycling. We learned about what their permitting process was going to be like. We learned who brought them to the area, what their lease situation was for the land that they were going to be on. We learned about advanced recycling from different groups already in this space: Break Free from Plastics, NRDC, Beyond Plastics, Moms Clean Air Force. University professors were very helpful. And we partnered from the beginning with Clean Air Council, their legal team and their organizers to get information. The next step was to reach out to the public. And this turned out to be super, super important. You can see in the top picture, in January of 2023, we had a group of Bucknell University students join our team as part of their classwork. And you can see them there with 3 of our locals. So actually 2 local folks and also one of the attorneys from Clean Air Council joined them in canvassing in the area across the street from the plant. And what they found was that the people across the street from this proposed site either thought that the project was a done deal, they couldn't fight a $1 billion project, or they didn't even know about it. And so the students talked to them and raised awareness with them, and they joined the group, and they have been instrumental the whole time. So I would say one of the really important things that we did was to target those local people. And you can see in the next picture down, the group of us, the students and the locals, and those are also the people from Dogwood Lane, which is that neighborhood across the street, who joined us when we fought them on a zoning variance that they were trying to obtain from Point Township. So that turned out to be super important. They were trying to get an 80-foot building in a place that was zoned for a 50-foot building. And the locals showed up and they said, this is going to impact my life. They showed pictures of their view. You know, I have a view of the river right now. I don't want an 80-foot building in the way. And that won the day. They said that we argued our case and that the company didn't actually argue their case. So that's very, very important. We also used a lot of outreach materials, signs and mailers. We tabled at various events locally. We held 3 public meetings in total. And we also worked with a videographer to make some videos for our website and to have at our public meetings. And that turned out to be very compelling for people as well. We met with the press. We just sat down with them in their office, and they turned out to be local people who were going to be impacted by the plant, and they got on board too. And they presented the events that we had at, with kind of a both sides company side of the story as well. But every time we had an event, they showed up, they put us on the front page, they put our quotes in there. And so it wasn't just the messaging from the company that everyone was getting, they were hearing our side as well. And so that really turned out to be a really excellent strategy for us. We also went on the radio. And another thing that the students did was they helped us get up a website and develop a logo and a group name. And that really helped for us to, at these tabling events, to say, here's our information. Just go to our website for more. We did a lot of outreach with local leaders. This group was incredibly diverse. There were a lot of different political viewpoints. There were a lot of different ages. People in our area, it's rural, it's very sparsely populated. And people in our area know their representatives, so they can go and harangue them in the grocery store and say, I voted for you. And so we just had a lot of real good support from people who had connections with their local leaders. And we also reached out to the downstream and upstream communities because they were going to be impacted, but they weren't going to have any say in whether or not this thing was built. And that turned out to be really important because one of the downstream communities said, hey, wait a minute, we're not in favor of this. It doesn't fit with our comprehensive plan. They wanted to do some more recreational things on the river, and they didn't want this stinky plant to be upriver of them. So they passed an anti-encina resolution, and that came out just this April, right before the company withdrew. So that made a big difference. Next slide, please. We also, as Andrew mentioned, we talked about, we learned all about the permitting requirements. We had a lot of help from Clean Air Council on that, asking hard questions, technical questions about the permits and things. We met with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, and that went really well, just so they had heard a bunch of greenwashing from the company, but they heard our side of things. And what really helped was that we had a person join our group who used to work for DEP. He was an aquatic biologist. And so when we got to the meeting with DEP, instead of like, welcome citizens, we are the Department of Environmental Protection, it was like, hey, Dave, dude, I wish we were still collecting fish together, and it was a totally different atmosphere. And, not everyone's going to have that kind of connection, but if you have them, just make use of them to to the extent that you can. And right here, I'll just mention again, we had legitimate concerns. We were concerned about air pollution and water pollution and the things that I mentioned, and we expressed them everywhere we went. DEP thanked us for coming to them with our concerns. There were some in the group who wanted to, call out the company and attack them and, investigate like backroom dealings and stuff. And although I'm pretty sure that kind of stuff happened, we had legitimate concerns, and there were a number of people that thanked us for keeping, that in the forefront. That really worked for us to be, just concerned citizens. We weren't, attacking anyone, or we didn't have to. We had, real concerns. I mentioned the impact of Clean Air Council, and funding is always a problem. We had money from Clean Air Council, and I'm a member of Climate Reality Project, and we had help from our chapter that along the way. But eventually I applied for some grants, and we got those too. When you're doing a project like this, people want to give you money because this is really important. And stopping these things before they get built, or calling into question their practices, making sure that they get fined when they should, is very, very important. And I'll just point out this picture here. These, we worked with Clean Air Council lawyers and organizers. You can see in this picture, this is them. They're all such stuffy old lawyers, we had such a blast. And that's Josephine in the middle, from Climate Reality Project. Just have fun if you can, because there's a lot of hard learning that goes on with these projects. And so the next slide, I think, is we won. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we won in April, after Northumberland Borough Council passed an anti-Encina resolution. Encina announced the next week that they were moving away. They didn't mention us at all, which I was a little offended by. They said that they were going, that there was such a demand for their product that they needed a bigger site, and they were going to have to choose another place. And so they said they were going to be going off to somewhere else or some foreign place. We're planning to chase them. This is not in my backyard thing for us. This is, we don't agree with advanced recycling, and we want to make sure that Encina doesn't build this anywhere. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Oh, I think we skipped one, but that's okay. Well, let's see if we can get it. Oh, maybe not. Just remember to have fun, celebrate your wins. This is us in our Zoom meeting after our win. And we did this celebration, and then the group started to talk about what's next. It's not in my backyard. And one thing we'd like to do is help out folks in West Virginia. So I welcome your questions, and thank you for your attention. Oh, then we changed the sign.
Wow, thank you, Sandy. That is just so inspiring. And, I'm really, really impressed with your guys' just super thorough inside and outside game. I feel like you really thought of everything and all the angles that could be effective towards stopping a facility like Encina in your community. And I really appreciate your perspective to look beyond your community and not want to just have this be a not my backyard project. Because there are a lot of these facilities popping up all over, like we discussed today in West Virginia, especially. So I really hope that we can partner on some of our West Virginia specific site fights going forward. So thank you for sharing your expertise and your time. Are there any questions for Sandy or for anyone else on the panel? I know we have just a few in the chat. Okay, it looks like the first question, we have a few from Mike Tony. What data or other evidence are you citing when you say Follansbee's air quality has improved since the Mountain State carbon plant closure? I think I'm going to turn this one over to Rachel.
Thank you. Yes, I can speak a bit to that. So first of all, I'll start with just the observations of residents who have noticed a huge difference in that they're not seeing black powder, black soot covering things in town. And I've heard from multiple people that for the first time really ever that they've lived there, they wake up in the morning, go outside and smell fresh air. They don't have, you know, an unpleasant sulfur-like smell and different smells coming from that facility. So there's just a real noticeable improvement in their air quality. And if you look at the American Lung Association's State of the Air report, you do see for the area that the particle pollution has improved and ozone pollution has improved. Now, they don't have much air monitoring actually in the city of Follansbee. And so they are working on that. And this kind of shows how important it is to have that in place. They have received an EPA air monitoring grant, which is exciting. So they are getting this in place. They'll be monitoring the particle pollution, the volatile organic compounds. And, you know, they want to have this baseline data of what, you know, what actually the air quality is now before any facility starts operating there, so they can point back to that. So I'll just mention the importance of those air monitoring programs as well.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Let's see. And Mike said, when you say they, do you mean the city of Follansbee?
Yes. Yeah, the actual city of Follansbee.
Great. Okay, and then we have one more from Mike as well. What concerns, if any, do panelists have with the Somar epoxy resin making facility just announced to be located in Wood County, West Virginia? I have not dug into their proposal, but I'm sure it's something that we'll be looking at closely. And if anyone else has any background, feel free to chime in. Looks like it's going to be a manufacturing facility. So thanks for flagging that, Mike. Awesome. Any other questions or comments from folks on the call?
Can I ask a question of Andrew?
Yeah.
I kind of missed that, what the advanced recycling exemption, the number is that 4084? Is that what you said for the bill, or the, whatever it is, to give them the exemption for advanced recycling as a manufacturer?
Lucia probably actually knows better than I do on the specifics of what that bill is numbered and titled.
Yes, House Bill 4084 passed in 2022 in West Virginia.
Okay, thank you. And also, I'm sorry, I have one more question. The plant in the Empire plant, are they building it? Have people seen that it's being built? They're waiting for the air permit?
It is being built at the same time. Yeah, they are constructing it.
I hate that they can build before they get the permits. It makes it so much harder to fight them. I guess that's the point.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, the building permit was approved in December of 2023. All right, wonderful. We just have a few more minutes left. I'm going to share in the chat a link to our Moms Clean Air Force West Virginia petition against chemical recycling. So I hope this webinar has inspired you to take action. Feel free to fill that out. It wouldn't take more than a minute. And then I'm also going to share our chemical recycling fact sheet. You guys can capture those links. Awesome. Well, I really, really appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for sharing your expertise, your knowledge, and for your hard work fighting back against these facilities and helping to protect the health of West Virginia's people and environment. It's so important, and we have a lot of work to do ahead of us. So if anyone on the call is inspired to take action or get involved, feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and I will share your information with anyone on the panel as well. So thank you guys so much. And have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Lucia, do you want to put those links in the chat again?
Yeah, it looks like it's just saying to host and panelists. Try again. There we go. And let me get my email really quick. Awesome. Thanks. Thanks, Rachel. Or thank you, Danielle.